Okay, so this video is going to cover strategy number 6 in the Promotion Playbook. And the Promotion Playbook consists of 7 strategies that are told in a story. And then there's 4 skills in the book at the end of the book, which are practical skills to help you prepare for your promotional test. So story, strategy, skills are the 3 parts this book helps you to master in preparation for your promotional test or your assessment center. This strategy 6 is embrace the pit. And it starts with a quote, getting off course is part of this journey. Regardless of how well you prepare, there will always be adversity. And then there's a quote afterwards from Mike Tyson that says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So leading up to this, the main character of the story part of this book is Jake, who's a firefighter. He's preparing for this test for engineer. And he's found this mentor that's helped to guide him on these 7 strategies. And then he's also developing the 4 skills to be successful with this test. And chapter 5 ends on a high point where he feels pretty good about where he's at. He's done the work and he's getting ready for the test. The last chapter was about finding purpose. And so with this, the part about finding purpose is it helps the reader to get engaged with these 2 emotions of pain and pleasure, all the emotions that come in between pain and pleasure. And so in purpose, the reader, the point of the previous chapter is to engage with the emotion of pain and pleasure, of the dark and the light, so that you can show up to this test with all your emotions. And then Jake's really on fire, and then he's presented with some adversity. So in this chapter, this is an example of what how this chapter plays out, is that the test doesn't quite go as Jake planned. He actually ends up plummeting, and he fails the test. And there's this quote here, stay in your head and you're dead, that if you make a mistake, so regardless of how well you prepare for an assessment center, there is inevitably something that you are going to mess up. It's part of the process. So even if you're the most prepared, there's going to be something that you mess up during the test. And when you do that, it's very important not to plummet down and allow that to be your demise. It happens to a lot of people, is that they mess up one thing and they can't get over it. And there's this spiral downward that causes them to mess up the rest of it. So Jake makes a big mistake, and unfortunately, this mistake ends up costing him. And so this just shows this process is that he's done everything to prepare. And so that's a big part about this book, is that if you do the work, if you follow the path that's presented in this book, there's a very high chance that you're going to be successful with your test. That being said, it's not a guarantee. So there's still adversity that you're going to face. Hopefully you can anticipate this adversity. And when you hit this adversity, you can use it to propel you towards your target, to your success, and not to derail you off of it. And so that's a distinction we make here, is that he hits this big pitfall and it's painful for him. So it says pain shared is pain divided. One of the key parts of this chapter is that he fails, but he doesn't hold that to himself. He reaches out and he shares this, and he's able to lean onto his community that he built that's there to support him, so that he did not have to go through this alone. Presents this metaphor of this concept called the quit tree, is that Jake hits this hard point. He's in this dark spot, and he's feeling really bad about his results. And in this time, it's very common that he wants to give up, and he doesn't want to ever go for another test again, because it's so humiliating, it's defeating, he's discouraged, and he put so much effort into this test, and to have it turn out this way is a major blow to his confidence. And so this metaphor is this quit tree that says the quit tree grows delicious fruit. And if you take this fruit and quit, it'll delight the senses for the short term, but its fruit is bitter towards the soul. So if you quit when it's hard, initially it's probably going to feel pretty good to do that. But in the long term, that pain, it's going to be much more painful to quit, know that you gave up, instead of pushing through. There's another metaphor that's not mentioned in this book, but it's a pretty common one, is that people often quit when they're 5 feet from gold, is that someone works really hard to find, metaphorically, they're searching for gold. And just when they're this close to it, it gets hard and they give up, not knowing that if they had just endured that much farther, they would have found the gold and reached their objective and got where they wanted to be. So I guess the other thing is it's darkest. It's always darkest before dawn. And these concept is that things are going to be hard. And so if you end up going through this book and you do everything right and you follow the steps and you still hit this dark spot, don't be surprised. It's actually, even though it's difficult, it can be, it's part of the process. So when that comes, expect it, keep going, and don't get off course, and just realize that your breakthrough is likely closer than you think. Even though you can't see it, there's a good chance you're much closer than you think you are, and victory is near for you. So this is a quote: endure and persist. This pain will turn to good by and by. Here's the main lesson from it. So the main takeaway is that there's going to be adversity. When you hit this adversity, the lesson and the tool that ends up getting passed on from this is this concept of understanding this emotional pattern. So you see here this emotional pattern that's constantly playing out in our lives. And this pattern, it's similar to what most of you probably learned in fire school, is the fire triangle, which they then turn into the fire tetrahedron. Is you have those 3 components that make up a fire. It's fuel, heat, and I should probably know this. So fuel, heat, and oxygen. Yeah, so you need the fuel, you need the heat, you need the oxygen, and then those 3 create this chemical chain reaction that then is the fire. That's the tetrahedron part of it. And so kind of similar to that is this emotional pattern. And it consists of your story, your feeling, and your actions. So when you get stimulated emotionally, which is throughout the day, this is going to happen. It can be a dark, negative emotion such as anger or rage, or it can be a positive, light emotion such as joy or happiness or gratitude. These are not, I'm not saying that these are good or bad. It's either light or dark, positive or negative, because there's benefit to using both of these. And so you can use this tool for either a really uplifting emotion, or if it's something that's really, really dark and negative, hurt, anger, upset, you can use that. And if you direct that, it can serve you. Kind of like fire. So you use the fire triangle, you get a spark and it starts to become a flame. That flame could be used to keep you warm. It could be used to light your path. It can be used to cook food. But if it's not directed and it's not controlled and given direction, it can burn down your entire house and maybe consume your neighborhood. It could consume you also. So metaphorically, this is very similar to this emotional pattern, is that Jake in the story, he failed the test. So he has this pattern of these old stories of, for example, actually, I'll show you how it plays out with Jake's example, but just the big part is be aware of how this plays out. There's a story, there's a feeling, there's an action, and this pattern loops, which creates our focus, and it creates the way we feel, and it creates our behavior. So we become conditioned based on these patterns in our life. We tell a story, we feel a certain way, and then we act a certain way based on that. Or we're acting a certain way, which makes us feel a certain way, and then along with that goes a story. So these 3 are interconnected. They all kind of work together. So if you look at the feeling, there's probably a story that goes with it, and then there's a behavior. So all 3 of these work together. And where you focus this emotional pattern is what you're going to see, it's what you're going to feel, and it's how you're going to experience life. So he talks about them. So the quote here is that every adversity brings with it the seed of equivalent advantage. So with this adversity, so here's an example. Adversity can either be a total defeat, and it means that you're never going to do well, or it can be a great gift that's going to make you stronger. Each one of those beliefs is a story, and they're going to have a feeling and an action. They'll have different paths depending on what you choose. So here's the email from Jake's mentor, and then here's the size up guide. So here's the tool at the end of the book. So one is that you size up the situation. So think of it like an emergency incident. You show up, and instead of being caught up in this pattern, the purpose of this tool, and this tool is just a simple writing assignment. It's just a few questions that you go through, so that instead of being stuck in this pattern, you're able to objectively look at this pattern, and then you can choose whether or not that pattern is going to serve you. And it gives you the option to create a new empowering story, which will then drive a different set of behaviors. So size up, what is the story? First off, what's the situation that's causing this emotional reaction? Then what is the story? What is the feeling? What is the desired action? So a lot of times the action that you want to do is not something that you would actually want. You may not actually act on that action, but when you tell the story, you feel a certain way. There's this desire to do things that you may or may not act out. Next is define the objective. So you're stuck in this cycle. And again, if you don't catch this cycle and it's a negative cycle, it could derail you and take you off course. But you get your focus, instead of being stuck in this looping pattern, this like a washing machine, you redirect your focus and say, regardless of this story, feeling, and action, this emotional pattern, what do I want? So you refocus on the target and define what it is that you want in the situation, which is define your objectives. So it's kind of like you show up to a house fire or an emergency incident, and there's chaos going on, and you say, hey, what is the objectives that we want to achieve here? Those are just a couple questions there. And then the question is, will this current emotional pattern get you what you want? Yes or no? Then it gives you the opportunity to create a new story. So this is where you can be creative. This gives you the opportunity to be the author, the creator of your own life, and not the victim of your circumstance. So you can choose what it means. Things happen, we make it mean something. So as human beings, we have a tendency to place meaning on things. So something happens, we make it mean this. Something happens, I make it mean that. Something happens, I make it mean that. And based on this meaning, here comes our story, our feeling, and our actions to follow it. So you can choose to create a story that's going to better help you to get to where it is that you want to go. So here you create a new story. So this is where you be creative. What's the story I'm going to create? With this new story, how does it feel? And then what is my action that this new story is driving? And then finally is capture the lesson, because by answering these questions, there is likely going to be a good lesson that comes from the experience, some type of gift that you can extract from this adversity. I'll show you Jake's example, and that'll be the end for this video. So here's Jake's example. So here's the title. He failed his engineer test. That's the title. So size up the situation. So what happened that caused this emotional reaction? He failed the engineer test because of a stupid wheel chalk that he missed. He didn't set it in one of the evolutions, and it was a fail point. So he failed the test because of it, regardless of how well he was doing everywhere else. And this is his original story. His original story is this. He says, this is bullshit. This test was fucking stupid. No matter what I do, I can't succeed at a promotional test. Now, I chose to leave the stronger words in there because in this situation, it's more realistic in terms of what Jake is feeling emotionally. So if you just say, oh, it's no big deal, then you're not being authentic. Or in this situation, if Jake was to say, oh, it's no big deal, I'll just test next time, he's not being authentic with what's really going on. The reality, Jake is really hurt. He's really angry. He's really upset about this. So that's the story, what he feels. He's angry, cheated, guilty, shame, sick, sad, and embarrassed. He's got a whole list of all these feelings because he tried so hard and he put so much into this test, and he felt like this was his opportunity to do well. But again, his worst fears just came back to come, and wham, they knocked him back down. And here he is, he feels totally defeated. And with this, what's his desired action? He wants to just, based on this story, so based on the story and the feeling, is Jake just wants to hit his retirement so he can leave, find a different job, or quit and never test again. If you've been in the fire service for a certain amount of time, you probably know a lot of people that fall into this pattern. They get bitter about whatever it is they get bitter about. Maybe it's a test, maybe it's the politics, maybe it's a station, maybe it's a family issue. And they started off thinking this was the best job in the world. And they get to the end of their career and they're just sick of all the crap that's going on around the department. and they go around with this bitter, cynical, resigned attitude. So this is an example of how it could play out for Jake if he were to choose to feed this story. So if this was his story, if this was his feeling, and if this was his action that he chose to feed and continue to play out, his the next 5 or 10 years of his career are not looking very bright based on this. So is this story true? Yes. When Jake's in the story, he says, yes, it's true. He's upset, he's mad, and it is a kind of a crappy deal that he got taken out because he forgot this little detail. Do you have 100% certainty that it is true? So once you start to question it, it gives rise to other possibilities. Is that while Jake's caught in this pattern, it's like he has these blinders on and he can't see beyond what he's seeing. Is that this failed test and this narrative is playing out and he just can't see beyond it. But with these questions, he says, well, maybe it's not true. Maybe there's another possibility here. Next question, beyond this story, feeling, and desired action, what are the facts in the situation? The facts is that the tire chalk was a pass-fail criteria. The fact was that Jake scored really high in everything else. He still has a great job, and his study partner got number 1, and he's really happy for him. So those are the facts that Jake came up with. Page 2. So we look back at define objectives. So regardless of this story, feeling, and action, what is it that he wants? What's the focus on? What you focus on, you're going to feel. So redirect that focus. And he wants to have a successful, fulfilling fire service career. And the whole reason he was testing for engineer is because ultimately he wanted to be a company officer. His dad was the fire chief, and he wants to at least be a company officer, maybe consider being a chief down the road. But Jake's real desire is he wants to be in that position of the company officer. So he realigns with like, well, that's really what I want. It sucks that he failed this test, but he can still win. There's still an opportunity for him to win in the future. So will the current story get him what he wants? No, the current story doesn't really help to get that objective. So here's his news story. So what's the news story to create, you could create to assure you get what you truly want? Jake says, I grew tremendously in this process and helped Mike to place number 1. This process made me a better leader, and I'll be ready for the next company officer test because of this. That's his news story. How does he feel? He feels grateful for the opportunity and all the support he received. He feels motivated to continue growing, happy to have the test over so he can enjoy some downtime. So instead of being caught and angry, he's like, there's some relief, but there's also hope and inspiration and gratitude that comes in with this news story. And with this story and feeling, his desired action now is that he wants to call his study partner, Mike, and set up a time to go out and celebrate his accomplishment. He wants to take the next couple of weeks off to enjoy family time. And then next month, he's going to commit to the captain's test. So you can see totally different story, which drives this different feeling and a totally different set of actions. So if you play this out over a year, 2 years, 5 years, it's going to be a totally different trajectory than that original story of just being resigned and bitter and upset. And instead, he's like, hey, I'm grateful and I'm going to keep on moving forward. And I'm going to celebrate with those that I helped to train with. And I'm also going to enjoy some time off because he deserved it. So that goes to celebration, which is the final chapter after this. And capture the lesson. So what's the lesson? So what's the big takeaway from this? The lesson is that details matter. Embrace the pain of failure and keep your eyes on the bigger picture. With this, actually, I got to change that. There's that question. So now, what will you do is the final question. So the concept is you get a new story so that you can kind of look at things different and avoid spiraling down from a bad story. Create a new one, direct it towards what you want, and then you want to put it into action, because it's one thing to get a new belief, but it's another thing to actually put it into tangible action and start moving in that direction. So he's going to set a time in his calendar next month when he will begin training plan for the captain test. So Jake finishes this writing assignment and he goes into his calendar immediately after, and he sets up his plan for the captain test. And he also sets up the accountability by reaching out to Mike And he's probably going to reach out to his mentor, Captain Tim, and say, hey, even though it didn't work out, I'm still committed. I'm going to be patient and I'm going to keep walking this path. So that's it. There's the tool and that's it. So if you got something out of this, I'd appreciate comments, subscribe up above, or the book will, if the book's out, you can get it on Amazon. And thank you for watching. Have tons of resources. You can reach out to me if you want anything else too. Thank you.